Welcome to the Ardan Labs Podcast. Our special guest today is Catherine Johnson. Catherine, thank you for joining us today.
Yeah, it's great to be here.
All right, give everybody the 2-minute spiel on what you're doing today, and leave it today. Don't. I'm gonna put you in the time machine at some point, so I don't want to sort of leak that out. So just like really what you're working on today.
Yeah. So I am at Hydrolix. Hydrolix is probably the best way to think about it is a massively scalable data platform. And I run the solutions engineering team for Hydrolix globally. And so what we do is we work with customers to figure out the best fit for our technology and the problems that they're trying to solve. So we want to understand what problem they're specifically addressing, not just technical, but what's the value of solving that technical problem. And then figure out if there's a good match between what we provide as a company and what our customers trying to solve.
So I just jumped on the website. That is
Correct.
hydrolix.io. Okay, cool. And right on the home page, the splash page, cut your logs cost by 4 times. That's already like resonating with me because logging data is some of the most, what would I say, like expensive and almost unused at some level, right? Because you only really look at it if there's a problem at some point. That's your first message on the homepage. Nice. Okay, so I think we've had some other companies here that like focused on big. I mean, when I think data nowadays, and I don't really live in this space, but when I think data, I think now like Databricks. Like it's that name is just constantly coming up, and I've never used it. Is that like a competitor? Is that
No, Databricks is more of an analytics platform. And so we're really more about storing all the data. And you can do analytics on the data from Hydraulics. So what we're really good at is if you have a very spiky load, if you have massive amounts of traffic, we're really good at scaling up to capture all of that data and then make it queryable very, very quickly. So a lot of our customers use Databricks and Hydraulics together. So they will ingest the data at scale in Hydraulics, and then we provide a Spark SQL interface. So they'll, from their Databricks cluster, will reach in and query data that's been ingested in Hydraulics to answer their query. So they get the power of Databricks and Spark along with the scalability of what we can do with data and Hydraulics.
so? You have like sort of like Helm charts and things like, or a service that you would run in Kubernetes already that just sort of, as a developer, I don't have to do anything. You've got
Right.
the integration.
Yeah, we run in Kubernetes. We have an operator model where we deploy the operator. We configure things that way. We typically are running the cluster as a service for our customers. We have some that will run it themselves. But for the most part, like, I mean, this isn't just Hydraulics, but anything these days is you want to focus on the things that really give you value as a company. And knowing how to run a particular piece of software that is more of an infrastructure company isn't necessarily, the best thing to spend money on. So a lot of companies really rely on us to be the experts at running Hydraulics for them.
Interesting. What other data other than log data are you sort of helping
It's
companies manage?
It can be anything as long as it's time series, append only. So we do our primary index on all data is always a timestamp. And some people say, well, my data doesn't have timestamps. I would argue everything has a timestamp at some point. Like there is a date that thing was effective, right? And then anything that's append only, we can go back and modify data, but it's not a primary use case for it. So that's why logs fit really well into this. But we're starting to get asked by a lot of our customers about, because of this cost savings and scalability, can you also do my metrics? Can you also do my traces? Can you also take in this other type of data? And so as long as it's append only time series data, we are all.
All right. I imagine you also have some APIs so developers can inject
Absolutely.
data into it as well. Yeah.
Absolutely. Everything, our whole product is very much API driven. So anything that you're going to do, query, ingest data, run bash jobs, is all done via API. We have a UI, but the primary driver of the software is the API.
Yeah, I'm just as we're talking, I'm kind of looking at the docs now too to see what's there. These companies like yours, just they're fascinating to me because never had to like get into this space. And so when I start thinking about data, I was having a conversation recently with somebody, and I was just like, we started actually doing the math, and I don't remember where the math took us, but I was in Europe looking at, somebody had their phone out, they were on some Instagram app, it wasn't Instagram, but there's their life, right? Their pictures and stuff.
Right.
And I'm looking around and I'm thinking, oh my God, like how much disk space is required every single day on the planet? Forget about just the United States, right? Like on the planet. And that data the data storage exists. Over the next minute, I don't remember what the numbers were, but like terabytes of data is going to be used just while we're talking. And somehow that storage exists and nothing's ever deleted. My brain just started to melt down because just even the physical component of that hard drive has to exist sort of somewhere, right?
I think about people at concerts and you see like everybody holding up their phone and taking a picture or a video of the same exact thing from a variety of angles. Like just even at that moment, how much storage that's taking. If I go back a little bit, I guess it was about 9 years ago now. So I was at Elastic 2015 to 2016, and it was around the time Elastic started getting into log data. We had acquired Logstash. We were starting to see more folks using data that way. And it was so interesting to me because there were all of these Elasticsearch customers that weren't doing log data, or not even necessarily customers, users of Elasticsearch. Wikipedia, some of those companies, when you're talking about human generated data, it just isn't that big. And so the clusters that were needed to run something that was really a search use case and not a logging use case were actually pretty small. And as soon as we started getting into logging, you started seeing it explode. And over the few years I was there, we went from folks saying like, yeah, I've got, a couple hundred gig a day that I want to ingest, to I have 135 terabytes I want to ingest every day, and I want to keep it for 15 months, and I want to search it, and I want to like just all of that. And so
Yeah.
it was getting to the point of not even like, can the software do it, but like what practically can you do with clusters that end up getting like absolutely massive if you're having to manage them yourselves.
So I just did the Google search again. Google says, I'm going to just round it up, 403 million terabytes a day. I don't even think that includes logs. I think that just includes what like social media is generating. So there has to be that amount of physical storage every single day somewhere on the planet. I just imagine that the big cloud companies just have people who are putting up racks of hard drives every day and they're barely staying in front of it. I can't comprehend it.
Yeah, I've always been so curious about on the back end of the hyperscalers. Like what does that look like as the stuff is growing? Like can you actually even purchase storage and compute that quickly? What does it look like to purchase storage and compute that quickly?
But it's funny, like right now it's almost impossible to buy GPU. Like if you need a machine, if you need it in GCP today, if I want to bring up a node with almost any type of GPU, I could easily wait a day or two. But we don't have that situation with storage, right? I don't know, man. It's wild.
I think
Okay.
the thing
Yeah,
about
go on, go on.
storage is more about the limitations on how many API calls we can make to storage. So we use object storage as our storage layer. And so where we start seeing limitations are literally on the API calls because of the amount of data that we're ingesting. We're reading and writing from buckets really, really quickly. So we actually ended up going to a multi-bucket architecture so that we don't hit those limits on buckets, and all the clouds have very different limitations on what you can do with their buckets. Some have, like Azure has an API limitation based on the storage account. AWS, it's mostly on the path, but there's some things that are limited on the bucket. So we just keep adding. For our really large customers, we'll set up like 10 separate buckets. So we're spreading the load across all those. So we're not hitting limitations.
Yeah, because the APIs, even for that today, are, I guess they're gRPC, but I don't know. Like maybe they're HTTP. Like, I guess, I don't know. Are you using gRPC based APIs for that?
It's
So,
mostly
yeah.
HTTP. So when we're
Just HTTP, right? Which isn't like the most efficient way, even if you're doing HTTP2 to move that data around. But I guess you know what it is. Like, I love when back in the '90s, I worked at a healthcare company, and we were going to move some data around for the accountants, and the accountants were like, "We need it real time," and that's always stuck in my head because I'm like, "What is real time?" Like, if I give it to you in the next like an hour delay, that's going to be more than enough for you. Don't
right.
come to me and say you need it like within seconds. Like, leave me alone.
So another earlier in my career, I worked with real time data, so like in-memory data grid stuff. And every time somebody said real time, I had that same question, like, what do you mean? Like, can we talk about what that means? If we're talking about a trading platform, that means this. If we're talking about a person sitting in front of a browser, that means something completely different. And then we would have folks who would be, they're like, I need it less than 10 milliseconds. It's like, great. But the data took 300 milliseconds to get here. So I'm not real sure what we're buying at this point. So there is always this sort of discussion around like, but your data is already kind of old. So me giving you results in, less than 10 or even 1 millisecond, like it's still, half a second old.
Yeah, yeah. It's just like it ends up not there's no reality to it. It's all perception in your head, right? Because you want to act on the most recent information. So if you've only given it to me in a minute, maybe something's it's the whole social media thing, right? It's the what if drug. I have to go and look again because what if something new has just happened? I don't want to be I don't want to miss it, right? It's this
We
sort of drug you're on.
Yeah, we end up I like to ask companies because we talk about that a lot too. They'll say like, I need this data in real time, and not just like what does that mean, but let's talk about what real time means in your business. Because like I had a conversation with a retailer a couple of years ago, and we were talking. They had tons of data, and it was really an exploratory product call. We weren't trying to sell them anything, and they said, yeah, we do analytics on our data once a season, because their business was like, they create a bunch of clothing, they have 4 seasons throughout the year that they're selling that clothing for. They come up with a plan and then they execute on. They don't really, they care that they sell it, but they're not going back and like looking at price on a daily basis or looking at like inventory distribution or anything like that. So it's always like in the context of the business. Like, let's talk about like, is your business machine driven? Is it human driven? What's really driving the information? That gets us in a little bit better of a spot with coming to a common understanding of what any given customer means about real time.
But I do imagine like a business like that that just didn't have the facility to look at the current season. You could open up some doors now for them. Now suddenly they can look at something mid-season and go, how are we doing, right? Which is still reasonable, right? We're talking about weeks.
Right. It's always like, what can they do with that data? Like, can they actually take an action on it?
I like that, right? If you can't take some action on it, then, but even like with logs, right? And I try to teach this from a developer perspective, right? You've spent all this time on CPU, network, and storage to put that log there. But here's my favorite question to ask developer. You come in on Monday, you've had no alerts, no problems, nothing went bad during the weekend. Are you going to spend time looking at the logs on Monday?
Absolutely not.
You're not. You're not going to spend time looking at that log on Monday, right? So we just spent all this time, money, and effort to produce 3 days of logs. So how many days of logs do you actually need to keep? Minus some compliance stuff, which I imagine you have to also sort of get involved in. But this is like the same sort of conversation, right? Like Like, what are we logging? How much of it are you logging? How long do we have to keep it? Right. And that to me is my favorite question. And I always get one person that's like, oh, no, I'm going to look at the logs on Monday. I'm like, get out of here. You ain't doing that. You got other things to do.
Interesting because especially when we're talking to security folks, they want all the data for as long as possible, right? Because you don't necessarily know what you're looking for in the moment because attacks are sneaky. They're rarely like these big, super obvious events. And so we will have conversations with customers where they're like, oh, yeah, I need it for forever and ever. I want to keep it. I want all of it. And when you ask getting out of that, like what do you think is in that data that it's worth it to you to pay to store it for that long? And a lot of times it's, I don't know what I don't know. I
Yeah,
want
it's for an insurance policy, right? I'm storing it because it's my insurance policy.
right, right,
Yeah. But you can't afford to do that anymore.
right.
You can't.
Yeah, and that's what we're attacking very specifically as a company is how do we make keeping all of that economical so that you can keep it without having to worry about the cost of it.
Okay, we're gonna get back to this conversation, but I gotta throw you into the time machine. So a couple of questions that we always start off with. One, I've got to age you. So what year did you graduate high school, and where were you on the planet?
1989.
89. Okay, I graduated in 87.
Okay.
Just
Okay.
okay, that's good. And that's a good question because it gives you a sense of like what tech was at the time. So
Yeah.
that's cool.
Uh, and I got my first computer when I was 10.
Where were you in 1989?
In 1989, I was in Virginia.
In
We
Virginia.
moved there from New Orleans. So I had done most of high school in New Orleans, then we moved up there.
To do your last year or last 2 years?
Last 2 years.
Okay. East side of Virginia, west side of Virginia?
Virginia Beach.
Virginia Beach. Okay, perfect. Beautiful place to sort of hang out.
Yeah.
Okay, now the next question. Clear your mind. I don't want you to think too hard here. Give me that first memory you have of sort of working on a computer, touching a computer. This first memory that pops in your head.
That's super easy. My brother's a lot older than I am, and he was at college. And my dad had bought him an Apple II. And he came home for the summer. It was set up in his room, and they were like, you can't play with it. If you learn how to program, you can touch it, but you can't play with it.
How old are you? Like 8, 10?
Or 10 years old. So it was.
You had to be mad. You had to be jealous. Why did brother
Oh
get
yeah,
this?
totally. It had all these cool cards, and you can pull them out and like put them back in. So I got a book on basic programming, and I did the classic like write your name over and over and over on the screen. So that was the very first thing that I did.
So your brother let you in his room to do
I mean,
that?
not entirely. My parents let me in his room to do it.
Catherine, you know it's really cool. This is so cool. I had a K Pro 2, CPM machine, okay, Z80 chip, all that. And that was like back in 85, 86. And I learned basic on that machine. But I threw it away. I was at a training last week at Eli Lilly, okay, in Indianapolis. And there was a guy in the training that's in one of these retro computing clubs. So he knew about the K Pro. He found me a repo that has a K Pro 2 emulator that I could run in my terminal. And I could run the M Basic that I used to run on the K Pro.
So cool.
So he got that working for me. I haven't had time to play with it, but I've got some basic programs that I had printed out back in the day. And I want to like find some time to write them up and see if the simulator can run them, because it would be the same thing. Like if you find some Apple, GUI simulator and you still have some software. Like it was just fascinating. I'm so excited to like play with it.
Somebody's doing a remake of the Commodore 64. I have an 18-year-old who is very into retro technology, and so I've ordered it for her for Christmas. But I'm pretty excited to see we never had a Commodore 64. I saw it at a
Yeah, I
friend's
didn't
house,
either.
but I'm sort of like, ooh, what's that going to be like?
So it's a full like it was 35 something years ago. You know, I was a little too old for this, but I did buy, and it's sitting in my closet because I have to solder. I have a PDP-11 kit. You got to get a Raspberry Pi to actually compute it. But there's a bunch of soldering and stuff you have to do with it. My very first class in college was like PDP-11 assembly, which was insane. But I'd love to. This guy got me thinking. He goes, "You could buy these K Pros. Like people sell them online for like $1,500." He goes, "You can find a working one." So now I'm like thinking about it like every day. I gotta go see if I can get. It would be amazing to have one of these machines in the house. I don't know. I
Yeah.
lived on that machine, right? Like you probably lived on that machine as much as you could where you were allowed.
I've done the same thing. I've looked at like, I bet I could find an Apple II out there that's still running. They're very expensive. They exist on eBay, but they're super expensive.
Yeah. I'm so mad I threw my machine out. I'm gonna guess it stopped working. I just don't remember. I don't have much of a memory, but I can picture it right now at the bottom of the driveway sitting at there with the garbage. Like I have this memory of that. I'm
Well, you
so
got
mad.
one that ran faster because, like, I remember, we had the Apple II, then we had one of the original Macs, and then when I went to college, we needed an IBM compatible PC. It was a 286 and had a 20 megabyte hard drive and a meg of RAM. And when I got the next one, which I don't remember now if it was a 386 or a 486, like I had done all the stuff like you could get compression software to like double your hard drive space and you could do right. I'd done everything I could on that machine and it just got to this point where like there were new games coming out. I couldn't play any of the games on the 286, so I was moving on. There was no use for that machine at all.
So
But same
you became a gamer. See, I never got into the gaming, but you
a
got
little
into
bit. Yeah, I there were some. I really liked Civilization. Was my
So
favorite.
is your brother like in the computer sciences?
Absolutely not.
No, so
He
I'm
is
not doing
a trauma surgeon, and I cannot explain to him how his email shows up while his computer is off. So.
it. That's wild. So he didn't go in that direction. And your parents or any of them sort of no.
Nope. My dad's he was a pilot. He's retired now. But he always had computers. Like that was something like he even, after my brother moved out, like he bought one of the first Macs. And so he was always kind of a hobbyist, but he was never a programmer. Like that was fully something that I was doing. He was using it more for like productivity and drawing and stuff like that.
But he saw computers in his job just because the
Exactly.
planes were really evolving back then. I remember in 1980, had to be 89 or 90. I got a job at Grumman Aerospace, and they showed us the stuff. They were just experimenting with the cockpits where the pilots could move. They're all virtual instruments, and they could start moving them
Right.
anywhere they wanted. Like, so I guess your dad had seen this stuff, must have known immediately this is important, and brought it home. What other things were you doing in high school? So you're hacking on computer stuff at home, which is awesome. But what other things were you interested in high school?
Here at Ardan Labs, we believe in empowering companies to reach their full potential through innovative technology solutions. Trusted by small startups and Fortune 500 companies alike, we specialize in high-performance software consulting, training, staffing, development, and now AI. With over 14 years of experience, Ardan Labs has trained over 30,000 engineers and served over 1,000 companies worldwide. Whether you're mastering Go, Rust, Kubernetes, Terraform, or blockchain, we're your strategic partner for performance-grade solutions. Let's elevate your tech journey together. Reach out to Ardan Labs today.
Honestly, so when we in New Orleans, there's a lot of music, a lot of culture. So I was always involved in that. When we moved to Virginia Beach and I knew nobody there, there's a whole lot of beach happening. And so it was there was a lot of that. And I played piano for a long time. But yeah, I was pretty nerdy. I was always a weird kid. I went to nerd school in New Orleans, as I like to call it. And even at nerd school, I was pretty nerdy.
So when you're about to graduate high school in Virginia, like where This was a time where you went to college.
Yeah.
There was no other, unless you were going to get into a trade, which is still fair today. One of my sons is in the second year of being an electrician. You were going to college, like, is what it was.
There's no
So,
gap year. No, the gap year didn't
yeah,
exist yet,
no,
right?
no, 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 no. Like, we went to school, both of us went to school in the 70s, where your parent dropped you off and said, if they get out of line, you have my permission to hit them. Like, this was a different time.
Right, 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 right.
um, so what are you thinking in terms of college and what you wanted to study?
What was funny was I really didn't want to do anything with computers. Like I didn't. Like I still did at home, but I didn't want to do that for my degree. So mechanical engineering was initially interesting to me, and I first semester signed up for that.
But wait. So what school did you end up going to then?
So this is also going to be funny because of my age. So because in the 80s, and I was a girl, education was not prioritized by my parents. So it was, you can go for 4 years. We're not paying a whole lot for it, but you better be able to support yourself off the back end. So I actually ended up at Old Dominion in Norfolk, Virginia, because I was not allowed to go away because I was a girl, which
Wow.
is, yeah.
I imagine your brother was getting a tremendous amount of support and funding. Yeah. So, have you ever talked? Are your parents still alive?
Oh,
My
yeah.
father's okay. Have you ever sat down like this Thanksgiving? Sat down and had a conversation about that at this age? Like
Uh,
it would be interesting.
they haven't really changed too much.
No,
Yeah, no, I mean, the thing that it did do for me was I became very determined. If somebody tells me I can't do something, I'm going to do it. So while I did go to Old Dominion for undergrad, I went to Tulane in New Orleans for grad school for computer science and had got a fellowship, had it completely paid for, didn't have to worry about it. But that was very much a reaction to this, because you are who you are, we're just not going to spend that much on your education.
bottom line was you had to find a way to pay for all of this and support how
That's
you
right.
were going to live. And I mean, we weren't kicking you out of the house, but this was on you basically.
Yeah, exactly.
So when you went to Old Dominion, you could stay in the house at that point, right? You didn't have to worry about living in the dorm, which kind of sucks because that's half of the experience is being sort of on
Exactly.
campus, right? But you went for mechanical engineering, and you got that degree in 4 years. You were able to do that.
No, I ended up because I was trying very hard not to do computer science. I actually had a few different majors. I was like, oh, mechanical engineering. Well, it turns out that actually wasn't all that interesting. What about civil engineering? And actually really didn't find that all that interesting either. Went through chemistry, history, right? A variety of things. And I kept coming back to I had this affinity for computer science. So I'd taken some business classes. The fastest way out was for me to get a degree in business with like basically a minor in computer science. So this was early 90s. So we had decision support systems and expert systems. And like that was the AI of the moment.
Why do you think you were fighting this so much? Can you think back on why was I just fighting what was inevitable?
Honestly, like I would have done something more like art history or fashion design. Like if I had just done whatever I wanted. And so it was so far away from that. I was just like, I don't want to do that. But I ended up doing to do a degree at that point, you're doing COBOL, you're doing job control language on mainframes, not punch cards, but like, straight up writing that kind of code on mainframes. And I had my brain, it clicked with my brain, like thinking like
I
that.
know. So now I'm curious. You end up falling back into it because it's the only thing you're actually interested in doing, even though this is not what you want to do from a career perspective.
Right.
Were you like mad at yourself that you kept falling back into this at some level?
No, I wasn't. I was just kind of like, oh, well, here we are again. And you have to remember in the early 90s, it was not a super lucrative career yet. So my first job out of school, I made $26,000 a year as a technical
You
professional.
did better than me. My first one was 18,000,
Yeah.
1992, because the job market was very bad back then on top of it.
Yeah.
So it took me like over 6 months to get that job, and I just took 18K just so they would hire me.
Right. Yeah. So I got that job and I kept getting pulled back into it. Like I was knew how to use a computer at that job. So that was kind of exciting. And then they, had me re-implementing the accounting system and all the stuff I had probably no business doing.
Really?
Yeah. And then, so that was after undergrad. And like you said, the job market is really hard. I had gotten laid off, and one of the options was I could go back to school. And that was when I ended up at Tulane. And it was
So you
funny.
decided to go back to New Orleans.
I was
So
in New
now
Orleans at that
you were in
point.
New Orleans already. So when you finished your 4-year bachelor degree, right? You finished that.
Go back to New Orleans.
You go to New Orleans now because you get this job in New Orleans. So now you're out of the house. You're paying your bills. You could barely get by at 26,000. You could pull it off. You weren't living the life of luxury, but you could pull it off.
I was making way more than most of my friends were.
You get laid off because again the market was really bad. Which wait, so you must have gotten this job in 93, 94,
93.
93. Okay. And then you're laid off in 94, but you're in New Orleans. So you decide you're going to go to Tulane. You're going to do that full time then, like a 2 years master's. What are you going to focus on in your master's in 94?
Distributed spatial data.
Wow. Why? That's interesting.
So again, I got into grad school. I was one of two women in the program. There weren't that many women. The only woman faculty member is on sabbatical at that point. And so, like, when you go into grad school, and I had gotten funding for a PhD, not a master's. I got my master's on the way to getting my PhD, but I did not finish my PhD because the industry had taken off and I was sitting in grad school and people were making six figures and I was not at that point. But you go around, you talk to all your professors about what they're doing and what their research is because you're trying to find an advisor that you want to do research with. There was a neural networks advisor that I went in and talked to him and hey, I just want to understand what you're doing research in. And his response to me was, I would explain it to you, but you won't understand it. It's like, okay, cool. We're not working with you then.
Wow.
Then I went to the security guy. I was like, hey, I really want to understand what you're doing research in. Security is really interesting to me. You don't have the background to do this. And he didn't even know what my background was. Like he had met me in classes. And the data guy, Dr. Petrie, was super nice and easy to work with. And he was doing this really interesting project, Stennis Space Center, Mississippi, which is the whole thing, with the Marine Corps doing basically mapping geographies for them to be able to do VR training so that they could like use a headset. And this was 97 at this point. So that they could use a headset to do training without actually having to go out into the field. And so we were building a distributed database of spatial data using quad trees across several machines in order to like capture that amount of data and make it available. And so that the system that was actually doing the rendering, because we weren't dealing with the rendering, we were just dealing with the data, but we needed to provide it fast enough that the rendering could happen in real time.
Yeah. I saw in 80, again, this had to be like 80 or 90, maybe 90, an F-14 simulator, which didn't move. It was one of these like little more than 180 degrees. But they had all of these wooden cutout boxes with other monitors that could be other planes, and they could simulate like an entire situation in the air, right?
Right.
So I'm thinking like the systems you're building on are so important to drive the data that they're sort of rendering, plus all the events that are going on sort of trigger all new data, right? And that was all new back then. So that's kind of exciting.
Well, and it was. And like, even though like I had that experience with the other professors, It turns out I really like data. And that's what I've stayed in my whole career is data. I've done a lot of application development, but I'm strongly of the opinion that applications are not really useful without data underneath them. So that's where my focus has pretty much stayed.
I teach about data oriented design. If you don't understand the data, you don't understand the problem, right? It's all about data. And every time somebody comes to me and wants to build these elaborate abstractions around their data access, I'm like, this is where you win or lose the game. The last thing you want to do is abstract here. You need to be as close to the metal as possible in a general sense,
Well,
because this is,
I like
yeah.
abstracting enough that you can swap out the data system in the back end. So as you're scaling up, if you're like, oh, this is actually very different than what I expected it to be, you can swap out the back end without having to like redo your entire system. So I do like that layer of abstraction.
See, I've never been in a situation where on a product that's made production, we've changed the database out. So I've
Okay.
always wanted access to the DSL, right? Whether that's SQL or if it's Mongo or something, right? Like I need access to that. I don't want that code gen. I don't want that abstracted away. But there are companies, there are people that have swapped out entire databases for production. Like I've never been in that world, thank God.
It's typically a skill thing. Like you start with A, right? Whatever that is, whatever your initial choice was, either because you did research and it seemed like the right thing, or simply because that's what you're familiar and comfortable with, right? Like a lot of full stack developers like to use Mongo now because that's what everybody teaches. They teach with Mongo. But then you get to a point where you're scaling up and either scale isn't working for you, your data needs have changed. You need something that supports more search or something that's more transactional in nature. So it's sort of like as the application evolves, your data needs basically change.
It's the
Exactly, exactly. My users are asking, they want to be able to do this kind of search, and I can't do that unless I change my data model or change the data system underneath.
But in grad school, you were kind of architecting at a low level databases, right? You had to build out that distributed. So you have strong implementation mental models of how, at least back then, how this stuff could be done, which is awesome.
Yeah, no, I worked on actual hardware, not like doing the hardware, but like running on actual systems until cloud really became a thing. So I have a memory of, I'm gonna say it was like 2005 of doing a proof of concept. I was working at Oracle, and it was not an Oracle database. It was more about moving data and business process. And we had borrowed some servers from Sun, and we had like set it all up in this conference room at this customer, and we had like 10 use cases we had to go through, and we sat there and we got them all done. They're like, cool, we're going to move it to this other room now so that you can show our executives in this meeting. And we had like everything's working with physical wires. We're like, we can't do that in here, maybe. No, we got to move the other room. Took it out, and we're just like, okay, we're like pulling cords and stopping stuff, and we get to the other room, nothing works,
Of
right?
course.
And it's in Minnesota in the dead of winter. So I have to come back like 2 weeks later to like do it again. And it was, yeah, just that I don't miss that feeling of, okay, and now we're going to pick it all up and move it. Because we would do that like at Java 1. I worked for a dev company in
All right,
2000.
before you get too far down, like other, because you're here
Yeah.
in graduate school, you're doing a PhD program, but you had hinted that you didn't finish the PhD program because industry was knocking and salaries were sort of. So talk about that first job that sort of took you away from school, essentially, right? Because you get your graduate degree,
hmm
but now what's that first job that takes you away from school?
It was working for the company. So we were using, in my grad research, a software called Gemstone S. And so it was a small talk, object oriented database. Gemstone hired me. They had come up with a Java version of their object database called Gemstone J. And so they hired me. I moved to Portland, Oregon, which is where they're headquartered. And The first thing I was doing was teaching folks how to do Java. And most of them were folks that had been doing small talk. And so they were much older than me and had very strong opinions about object-oriented programming. Were very upset about some of the choices that were made with Java.
I have no doubt. I have no doubt. I have no doubt because Smalltalk is the first object-oriented programming language. How dare you not do
Yeah,
these things?
right. So I was doing that, and we were working. Like I gradually moved in. I was doing more consulting at that point. So I was going out. So I taught for a while initially, and then I
What
started
year is that? Is that 98, 99, 2000?
99 2000.
Okay.
So move out here, start doing, and it was an object-oriented database. So start working with some really big customers, doing some stuff with object-oriented databases, which I thought were the most amazing thing ever until you had to live with it. And you had schema changes, and you had to do reporting, right? And suddenly none of those tools exist on object databases, right? And so as much as I love this model of data, it was like, this isn't actually very practical for a lot of things. Like from a maintenance perspective, just keeping it alive and running. It was hard.
So how long were you at that company? How long did you?
About
And then what happened?
Then I went to, there was another company here in Portland called ZAT, that was doing this, huh?
How did you find out about that? How does this job? I'm always interested in how the job comes across your desk, right? Was it a recruiter? Did you just see it? You were at a bar, somebody like,
ZAT had come out to Gemstone to do a presentation because we're all in Portland. And they had this really cool visual development tool, which is not a thing at the time, right? People are using VI and Emacs and everything. And they had this really cool like drag and drop tool to build applications with. And I am not a UI person. And when I interviewed with them, I was like, "You don't want me near your UI. It's like not my talent."
that's me even today, Catherine. I'm not allowed to go near the designers.
No, absolutely not. And so I had reached out to them because I just thought it was really cool. And so I had gone down to interview with them. It was a really small company. I got acquired by BEA right when I was interviewing, and then
Why does that sound so familiar?
it was one of the first WebLogic, so one of the first J2EE. So they got acquired by BEA, and then they had acquired Visual Cafe and ZAT, and a couple. Hoplink was one of the things that was acquired that Oracle now owns. Those
That's
things,
how you got to Oracle through that.
not exactly.
Oh,
I
okay, okay.
got to
I'm
Oracle
jumping the
through
gun.
my first job because somebody I met from Oracle while I was working at that first job had reached out to me and was like, "Hey, we would love you to come do this thing." So I worked at ZAT for a while. I went back to Gemstone after that. So ZAT slash WebGain burned through. This is like in the dot bomb era of we're going to blow through $400 million in 6 months kind of thing.
Yeah.
They did that. So I went back to Gemstone, and Gemstone was at that point coming up with, and they were trying to figure out like, what do we do with all this technology we have? That object database J2EE server thing didn't really work out. And so they had started building Gemfire, which is an in-memory data grid. And so I went back there to help with figuring out like, okay, how do we go to market with this? And was reporting into our CTO at that point.
And you were more like a product manager at that point?
Lead business development architect. I had some really bizarre title that I didn't quite understand, but there were four of us, and our job was to come up with ideas and be able to prove them out that, yeah, this is interesting.
How long were you back with the gemstone then?
I did that for another year.
So, okay.
And then I left tech altogether for 2 years. 2002 to 2004, I left tech fully for 2 years.
So were you just sort of burned out on tech? You just didn't. You try so hard to get out of this. Like this is a repeating thing with you, right?
Yeah, no,
I don't want to be here.
When I did it then, it was interesting. I really needed something more tangible. Like what we do in tech is so cerebral, and there's a lack of like, really tangible things that, you complete something, you're like, aha, it's done, right? Like nothing's ever finished. And I needed like something that was very firmly
You
rooted.
wanted some sort of physical product that's
I went and taught dance for 2
you're
years.
kidding me. You haven't talked to me about dance at all at this point. So
It's been
let's
a
go
while.
back a little bit. Were you dancing in Virginia? Were you dancing in the
No, I mean, I always had, but after I came to Portland, there's at that time a really cool Middle Eastern dance community here. And we'd also lived in the Middle East when I was growing up. And so I'd always like just had a very deep connection with that music and that style of movement and everything. Uh, and so I got really into it and ended up not really on purpose, but sort of accidentally teaching Middle Eastern dance.
and that was good for 2 years? You could make enough money to sort of
Yeah,
maintain that lifestyle.
I did. There were other parts to it as well. There was like a boutique, and we did performances and things like that. But 2002 to 2004, if you'll remember, there was like definitely a lull in tech.
Yeah, no, there was for sure. Yeah.
Yeah, there wasn't a ton going on. And in 2003, Oracle reached out to me, and they were like, hey, we're making this team. Can you come do it? And I was like, no. And then in 2004, they reached out again, and I was like, if I'm going to go back to tech, I probably should.
So two things there. Two things. One, I'm curious, you not being of some Middle Eastern descent, did that make it hard to teach those classes? Because I was learning salsa when I was here. I live in Miami, right? But if the person teaching me wasn't Latin, I think I would have. It may have, like in my brain, had a bias. Did somebody have a bias that you weren't?
At
So,
that time, no, definitely. And the approach that we took was very much rooted, not so much in like people think about Middle Eastern dance and you think about like all the sequins and all the stuff, and we are much more rooted in the cultural aspects of it and like where it came from. And so because we had lived in Kuwait, my dance partner had lived in Egypt for a long time. There weren't a lot of people at that time that had been exposed to that type of music or that
mm,
type of dance. This was, you know, before the 2003 timeframe was when everyone was out protesting, like, no, we're not going to go to war in Afghanistan or Iraq. So it just wasn't like part of the consciousness at that point. So
gotcha.
no, I think it would be very different today, though. I think I would feel super off this point, even though like then even we were trying to put it in its cultural context and not just make it about like, cool outfits or whatever.
Yeah, I guess my question is rooted in 2025, which is interesting, right?
Yeah.
And then somehow Oracle is reaching out to you again, which is super interesting. You must have really made an impression on the people that were trying to do this, and I imagine they really felt like they needed you. Did you feel like you hadn't done anything for 2 years and maybe you lost something, or that you just was like, I think now's the time to go back?
I was worried about losing it. It wasn't that I felt like I had lost it. I was worried about it. So if you're doing something physical for a living, you're completely dependent upon your body being healthy and uninjured. And while I could make a living doing what I was doing, it had a real impact on like, if I was going for a hike, I had to think about that. Like if I twisted my ankle on a hike,
Mm.
there's a bunch of stuff I can't do.
Like an athlete, right? Like a pro athlete that gets hurt in a pickup game, you're just like, what were you thinking? Right? Like, what were you thinking? So
Yeah.
you had the same sort of, what were you thinking? Like you had to dance tomorrow to make money. It's interesting.
Yeah, I mean, it was really fun. It was in a moment. I was living in Chattanooga, Tennessee. We had a lot of folks that came in who had to like walk without like moving her hips at all because that was just a very conservative place. And
Yeah.
so it was like what I really enjoyed about that was watching people really blossom and start with something that felt really hard and foreign to them. And then, in 6, 12 weeks, see them confidently being able to move in new ways with their body. That
That's
was cool.
awesome. My wife's Colombian, and I always like tease her. She's got like a 6-inch swing on both sides because it's how Latin women sort of walk, right? Like they're born in a pair of high heels. Just, I always like joke about that. But you made me think about that when this woman was sort of trained not to swing her hips at all. Really, that's serious.
Yeah. It was really rewarding. I mean, it was really cool on a very small scale, right? Like it was in a small town with small classes, but it was really cool to feel like I had an impact on somebody's life.
I just wonder if that person, when they left class, had to go back into mechanical, don't swing the hips mode, or at some point just feels freedom to like, I'm not going to live like this anymore, right? Like, super interesting. All right. So Oracle comes calling twice. It's 2004. And you say, okay, it's time to go back. What was the project? I imagine the project had something to do with it because if you weren't interested in the project, it wouldn't have happened.
Yeah, it was Oracle had a J2EE server called OC for J. I think it was Orion. But Oracle at that point had traditionally been very much a database company. And they were trying to get more into this middleware space. And so they were forming a team of solution architects that were 100% focused on not the database. So, security, J2EE stuff, Beeple, business process execution language. They'd done an acquisition around that, Portal technologies, which were a thing at that time. And so the team that they built out that I ended up joining was completely full of folks that were specifically not doing Oracle database. So completely like very much application developers, which was funny because one of the first calls I was on in 2004, a customer was like, "Oh, we want a web page." I'm like, cool. Well, we want people to like be able to put in information and click a button and then we record them. Like, awesome, yeah. And the salesperson is like, say something else. I'm like, people do this every day. Like, I'm not really sure what I was supposed to say here. Yes, we can do all of those things.
That's funny. How long were you with that team?
I was on that team for 2 years and then I managed a part of the team for years.
All right. So 6, 8. And I mean, it sounds like to me, I mean, if I'm wrong, you were like a solutions team for clients that were not necessarily using Oracle. Though I guess they could have been using Oracle, but that wasn't the focus.
Well, it was at that point, it became very much about like Oracle had e-business suite, which was built on top of Oracle database. That was like their
Right.
CRM.
Their CRM. They're
Yeah,
getting towards this.
exactly. And then they bought PeopleSoft while I was there, and Siebel, and a bunch of like a ton of companies.
I did PeopleSoft for like a couple of years in
Okay.
the late, early, yeah. Like, in fact, a buddy of mine ended up getting government contracts just for PeopleSoft and tried to get me to do that because he was making like $200 an hour on the government.
Yeah.
And I couldn't do it. It was too boring. I just couldn't do it. I couldn't do it. I wanted to shoot myself.
Well, it's like it's a well-solved problem, right? Like there's nothing that's like you have to really go figure it out in that space. Like, it's been modeled out. But Oracle at that point they would sell you all these applications and then they would say, and you have to figure out how to integrate those
Gotta
yourself.
customize it. That's where the money was.
Right. So we would do things, the team I was on, we would do things like setting up to cash flows. So it would be like an order comes in through Siebel, for example, and then it has to be turned into billing. There's a shipment, then there's all this demand planning, all those things, and all of that had to be orchestrated through a process. And so the team I was on, we would go and help orchestrate those processes.
You build out those screens and the CRM and the work.
Not the
Because
screen,
it's all there, right?
all the back
All
end,
the
and
back end.
yeah, all the data screens are somebody else.
So this is your longest stint. I mean, you're there now for like 4 years.
I actually ended up being there longer. After I was managing the team for a bit, I went on to like Oracle has this, they have a separate applications team, applications, which are like the people selling HR and all of that, and a tech team. And so I sat on a team that was in between those that would help the folks selling the applications understand how they were going to orchestrate it all together.
So then how long were you there at Oracle? That whole time?
2004 to 2011, so about 7 years.
So I was just looking it up because I couldn't remember. Oracle ends up buying Java from Sun in 2010. So you're there kind of right there at the beginning of that whole situation that's going on. But Java, you weren't really working in Java at that point because the CRM had its own. You were.
Yeah,
Everything's.
absolutely. Yeah. I would say I worked primarily in Java till about 2015.
So I'm just curious. Give me like 2 minutes. What was it like when Oracle decided to buy Java from Sun? Was it non-eventful? Was it eventful?
The one I remember being more eventful was actually the PeopleSoft acquisition because PeopleSoft was so anti being acquired by Oracle, and there was a lawsuit and everything around that. The Sun acquisition seemed more obvious at that point because Oracle had already come out with Exadata, which was like the database appliance thing, and that was all Sun hardware. So there was a facility here in near Portland, out in one of the suburbs, Hillsboro, where they were actually putting the Exadata machines together. So when they bought Sun, it was more of like, okay, well, this makes sense.
I wasn't a Java developer. Back in those days, I was either coding in C, C++. Maybe I was doing C sharp by 2010. Um, I just remember such a negative connotation in the industry when all that happened. And I have no skin in the game, but I still have like, if I think back in my memories, like nobody was happy about that at the time. Nobody.
Well, and I think like Oracle had, at least at that point, a reputation for being kind of predatory around licensing. And so I think that there was a really big fear because nobody was licensing Java, especially. Like that wasn't something that Sun was really doing.
Yeah, that's what it was. Yeah.
And so people were really worried about like, okay, so now Oracle's gonna be all up in my stuff over my use of Java.
They're going to send me a bill now for my Java problem.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's what it was. Everybody was panicking what Oracle was going to do now that they owned it. Yeah, I remember that. That's maybe my first stint in thinking about licensing and ownership and yeah.
Yeah.
So what happens then so you're there a long time. You said from 4 to 12, right? So you're there for 8 years. I mean, that's a long time. What sort of pulls you out of Oracle?
So that first job I had at Gemstone, they had been acquired by SpringSource, and SpringSource had been acquired by VMware. And
Mm.
there have been like some other things that had happened in the industry at that point. So Enron happening was something that had caused a lot of growth for Gemstone and the Gemfire product because it was the whole
The
platform.
oil spill?
No, the when Enron imploded
I'm
itself,
sorry.
yeah,
Yeah,
when
yeah, yeah.
it was like a energy trading platform and it just like totally blew up and like everybody moved to a different platform. And so the CEO of that company had been my first boss of the Gemstone part of it. And he's like, we would love for you to come back and get on this deeply technical team. It's called Advanced Field Engineering to basically help customers figure out how to use our technology and like help them understand how it would benefit them. Cool, you want to use an in-memory data grid. How? Like, how do you architect that? What does the data look like? What's practical for setup? And again, like we're still, for the most part, talking about physical machines at this point too.
So you end up getting hired by Gemstone or VMware or
VMware. So it was VMware
VMware.
at that point, but it had been like
These
this.
are like at the time, they're not, I mean, these are big companies. They really turn into massive companies, but you're kind of there in the beginning mid of Oracle, beginning mid of VMware. I mean, that's super fascinating to kind of be on the cusp of them sort of blowing up at some level.
Yeah, VMware is interesting because like VMware, EMC, RSA, and eventually Pivotal, as a group of companies, were very much like Oracle, where except it was done as separate companies. VMware and EMC in 2013 ended up kind of taking everything that wasn't hardware virtualization and spinning it out into Pivotal. And so I was part of the beginning of Pivotal just by the nature of being aligned to technology that VMware wanted to move out because it was not virtualization related.
That's wild. So you were part of the Pivotal Labs and all that because they built, right? They had built, there's a new resurgence on what Pivotal did happening again today, right? They basically built your back end application plane. You don't have to write this, you don't have to write that anymore. We've got it. Just sort of plug into it. And it's happening all over again now with systems like Lovable. Have you seen Lovable?
I've heard of it, but I haven't messed around with it.
If you look at Lovable, your brain's immediately going to go, yeah, Pivotal Labs is driving that, right? They have to build all the same things that Pivotal built in order to make that work. So a front end developer, not even a front end developer, a vibe coder could have access to databases and auth services and all the things that you had to build, right? But just do it now from a vibe coding perspective and have AI generate it all. It's I had somebody on my live coding show from there. And the first thing they said to me, well, Bill, I'm not a real developer, so I'm afraid to be on the show. And I'm like, you're supposed to be like the new developer now, right? You're vibe coding everything.
Right.
Why are you saying this to me? Don't be afraid, right? But it was like Pivotal was all over my brain when I saw what they were doing. And there's more and more companies sort of, if Pivotal was still around, like they could have been the platform for everybody. It's just amazing.
Yeah.
But you're at the beginning of that, which is, I find it interesting because the one thing I found interesting about Pivotal at the time I discovered, this is what, like 2015, you were saying, right? This was
2013 to 15. Yeah.
13, 15. I was always like, why do I want to use Pivotal? I can build my own backend systems. I don't need them for that, right? Like the people that need them don't want to do the engineering.
Right.
Like that was the bias in my head, right? Because I wanted to build that stuff. And obviously there was value because a lot of companies built stuff on top of it. But I go back now today to all these AI systems that are building all the front ends. Yeah, it's just wild. How long were you working on that project with Pivotal?
So that was 2013 to about August 2015. So I was on that field engineering team, helping customers, and then I moved into the product while I was working there, and it was sort of funny. It was not uh, your typical product experience because I already have really strong relationships with the engineering team because at that point I had known them my entire career. Like that was the team that I had started out with in '99.
Which is awesome because they know you, they trust you, they know
Right.
you're technical. You didn't have to prove yourself, which any person walking into a company, their first 30, 45 days, I'm always like, make one small win. Just have a silly small win, and then people will start to trust you.
Yeah.
Get another small win, and then life will be. But it's beautiful because you can walk in there and everybody already knows to respect your background and knowledge. That's awesome.
I had typically, when I had gone to engineering, especially when it was my first job, always wanted all of my ducks lined up. If I'm going to go ask engineering a question, like I need all of the things done. I'm not going to go back with like, it's broken, right? Like it's broken and I tried X, Y, and Z. These were the outcomes. And so they were very used to me being like that. So it worked out really well.
So, okay, so you did this role. It's still a pivotal role, but you're basically moving up the ladder. I'm kind of curious, even if it's 2015, which we've got 10 years now. Are you staying technical? Are you still getting your hands dirty on code? You're never losing that, right? Because that's your lifeline. So I say to everybody, even if you just go home and write code for 5 hours a week, that's your lifeline. You can't You can't lose that.
Having been through a few recessions in our industry, that is something I will never stop doing because that, like, you always need the doers, right?
Yeah, I'm I'm coding every day. I do client 5-10 hours a week of client work and stuff, and I build a lot of training material and all of that. But I'm never gonna. It's my lifeline. I lose that, it's game over. So now what happens in 2015?
So in 2015, a good friend of mine he had been part of VMware Spring Source Pivotal, and within a few months of Pivotal happening, he had gone to Elasticsearch as their first solution architect. He spent the next 2 years trying to convince me to come join him, and after about 2 years, he finally convinced me to come join him. So in August 2015, I joined Elastic as a solution architect to, at that point, really focus on their partner business. But similar kind of role again, like how do customers adopt this technology? How do you find a good fit? What are the best practices? How do we enable folks on being able to use the technology? And that was around the time that they had really just started to get into the logging use cases.
Because they were founded in 2012, so they brought you in 2015. I mean, that's a perfect fit for you, right? Because you get to get back to your core data roots, which is performance, search, sort of scalability. I played a little bit with that Solar Lucene on a project. The first time I saw it and I played with it, I thought it was like sort of mind blowing what you were able to do with technically almost like unstructured data, really, right?
Yeah.
Like it was a company that was doing at the time ringtones, where it was really hard to put a ringtone on your phone. So they had built this entire site of giving you ways of creating the ringtone themselves and then deploying them on all the different phones. It was a pretty cool project. And traditional database search was not working for the ringtone search on the website. But the Solar Lucene, just like when we first tried it, it was mind blowing, right?
It's
Uh,
it's really cool. It's still a really Elasticsearch, because that's Lucene based, is still a really unique database, if to use that word a little bit loosely. It has unique features that nobody else really has.
but the Elasticsearch has like all that, but at scale, right? Like I've never used Elasticsearch, but it's all that at scale.
Ex-
And I don't hear it as much as I maybe like 5 years ago. People were like, it would always come up somewhere in a conference. I'm not hearing it as much anymore. And occasionally I start to think why, like what has changed in the industry that people don't feel they need that anymore. I don't think it's AI at any level,
I
but
think they shifted more to observability, really. So it was less
mm,
about like search use cases and more about observability. And they're effectively a vector database. So they're really, if you look at a lot of their materials that they're putting out now, they are really focused on AI and vector types of topics.
I do remember anytime they did come up in conversation, or it was always people were dumping logs into Elasticsearch for that. So that makes sense. So how long are you at Elasticsearch then? Again, at the beginning of these really cool companies, right?
So I was there about 3 years. Um, and honestly, I got super burned out. I had shifted from that original solution architect role to managing a solution architect team, and then moved back into product doing competitive intelligence. And it was right before the IPO, and it was, yeah, just super burnout. Took some time off after that.
Okay, that's cool. You were burning out because of the hours you were working, or just
Yeah, it was just leading up to an IPO is just like there's a lot of new stuff that you have to do in order to prep for that, and there's a lot of changes happening. It was interesting because I had gone back into product. So Pivotal, that first product role that I had, like I said, was with the engineering team I started my career with. So I had a very pretty view of what product management was like. And then I went into the product team at Elastic and it was like, oh, huh. Um, I actually was telling somebody the other day who was thinking about going into product from solution architect. I was like, everybody's always mad at you. Like you're never like you cannot please everybody.
Yeah.
You never will please everybody. And so there's always people just truly upset with the job that you're doing. There's no avoiding that. And so at Elastic, that was really the first time that I had experienced that, and I did not like it.
No, there's a personality that, like, I'm the same way. I don't do well when that's happening, but my business partner that does the sales, he thrives on it. He thrives on it. Like, thrives on rejection. It's a challenge to him.
Can't
And
do
I'll
it.
watch him and I'll laugh because I'm like, how do you do it? He goes, it's just part of the job. And I'm going to talk to them again tomorrow and it's going to be different tomorrow. I can't do it. I just can't do it. I can say no to people and I can deal with the short term, but what you're describing takes a completely different. You need thicker skin and you have to constantly remind yourself that it's not personal, but it's hard. Yeah. No, I'm with you. That would be, I always make jokes that I can't be a front end developer because I'll work for 6 hours on a screen and the first thing out of somebody's mouth is, I don't like that. I'd be in jail because it's always negative coming at me. I
Yeah.
can't do it.
I feel the same way about a support role is, people don't call support to be like, thank you. They call you because like stuff's broken. And so you're constantly dealing with people that are upset. And I'm just like, no, thank you.
So when I call a company, whether it's the airline, whatever it is, right? The first thing out of my mouth is, I know this is not your fault. I know you
Right.
didn't do it. I'm not mad at you. And I apologize if I raise my voice. And that always helps me set the sort of tone with somebody on the other side of the phone, right? Because we've been on the other side and it's like, hey, it wasn't me, but I'm going to try to help you. What I find interesting is they IPO, right? And then you're like out of here. But I guess all your shares and everything got converted. You were secure. So nothing else had to mature at that point, I
Yeah.
guess. So you were like free to go do your thing. So you take some time off. How much time you take off? 3 months, 6 months,
6 months.
year, 6 months.
Yeah. And at that point, I went to New Relic. And I went to New Relic because there's a team of folks I worked with at Oracle that had been hired into New Relic to help them shift to more of an enterprise sales motion. It was the first company that had a decent presence in Portland. I'd always worked pretty remote from Portland. And they had a head of sales that was a woman. I never experienced that before. So I went into New Relic doing that, and I was super focused on the AWS partnership.
Yeah, New Relic is, from a data perspective, a lot of that data has to either be stored locally and then eventually sort of, we used on C Sharp, I used the New Relic stuff. It was brilliant to be able to just load that and
Yeah.
start getting. For Go, it's really hard because you can't just inject code when you're working in Go. So that's been a problem there. But again, another really cool company that you're doing sort of work for. How long are you at New Relic?
I was not there very long because during my first week at New Relic, the CEO of Hydrolix, Marty, had found me on LinkedIn. And he's like, I did a search for these things and your name came up and you're in Portland. So I think it was like Thursday of my first week at New Relic. We meet up for lunch. He told me about what he wanted to build, which was this really cool system specifically for logs that use object storage. It got amazing compression and real-time query speeds. And I was like, no, like that sounds amazing. If you can get that to work, that is great, but that doesn't sound real. Like that was my reaction because at Elastic he was solving the problem that Elastic was really struggling with, which was when you have massive amounts of data, like managing that just gets really hard. And like the systems that you have to use to manage it start getting really expensive. So we met my first week in New Relic. A few months later, he came back around. I was like, hey, we're doing this. I'm raising money. I would really like you to come on as my head of product. And I was like, I was pretty comfortable at New Relic, honestly. Like it wasn't, it was,
I think you were still burnt out a little bit too, right? You were still,
yeah, I was good at that point. The
you
six
were,
months
okay.
really did it for me.
Okay. So you weren't thinking, do I really want to jump back into new product development?
No, it
It was
was,
okay.
yeah, no, it was fine. But what I did tell Marty was I have these two really good friends. One I had gone to school with in New Orleans at Tulane, and one was a really good friend from Elastic who had been part of writing the initial version of Elastic. And I'm like, I'm not interested, but you should really talk to these two friends of mine because they've done a lot of stuff like this. They get the problem space, and they're just good people. Like they're awesome humans. So a few weeks later, they were both involved. One of them was on the payroll. One of them was acting like an advisor, and I was on a business trip in Australia, and my eardrum had burst, and so I was stuck in a hotel room. I was completely bored, and they're both texting me like, when are you gonna come here? You have to do this. I'm like,
Man, they're just beating you.
work. Yeah, I'm like it doesn't work. And they're in it, right? It's not like at a superficial level. And they're like, oh yeah, it works. Like the premise works. And so that was in April, and by I'm gonna say like June 10th, I was working at Hydrolix.
So 2019.
2019.
Yeah. So, and now you've been there for 6 years.
No.
Uh-oh. Uh-oh.
Well, so 2020, COVID happened.
Yeah.
And I had some other ideas that I was interested in pursuing. And so I took another 6 months off to go pursue my idea. And it wasn't because like I wasn't interested in what Hydraulics was doing. I was just like my brain was so excited about this other thing that I was having a hard time
You
focusing.
had to scratch the itch.
I had to go scratch the itch. So I did that. It was consumer focused, which was not something I had any experience in whatsoever. And it's completely different than enterprise software. So spent like 6 months on that. And then the friend who had brought me into Elastic had gone to Grafana to lead the
Oh,
pre-sales team at Grafana. And he's like, hey, could you come in and start up a field engineering team? There was somebody that was already on staff there that was doing the job. And I was like, yeah, that sounds cool. So I went and did that. But I had met some other folks when I was doing my own startup through the Portland incubator that were building AI models for empathy. That was super interesting. So there are three of us that started Empathic, which is still around. And so as a psychologist, myself, and a data scientist. And so I was really more like the data architect of the whole thing. And I kind of like it was super interesting, but it was not the scale of problem I was used to solving, honestly. And I really missed that scale and these problems that were like really intractable from an infrastructure perspective. And Marty and I, the CEO, stayed in touch. And I talked to another one of my friends. I'm like, I don't know what I want to do next. Like, there's all this stuff I could do. I've done product, I've done this, I've done that. I got to figure out what I want to do next. And he was like, what's the most fun you ever had? I'm like, hands on, deeply technical, customer facing. So Marty and I happen to be talking. I'm like, hey, I'm gonna leave. I want something like this. Exactly those words. He's like, I need that. Will you come back? And I was like, yeah, let's do that. So then I came back. And so I came in doing, at that time, there were six of us globally doing SRE, support, services, pre sales, technical account management. So fully on the rotation every 2 weeks on call to manage clusters. And then as we grew, I moved into a field CTO role. And then a couple months ago, moved into the role to lead pre sales globally.
first of all, that's amazing. One of the things I find really interesting, maybe you can talk about it a little bit, is you have a really good track record of going to a company, leaving, and coming back. So you've learned how not to burn bridges, apparently, as you sort of navigate the problem space that you want to work on. And you've worked at amazing companies, like really, really amazing companies. So can you talk a little bit about how you do that? Because I don't think a lot of people know how to not like, burn down a house when they're leaving.
To me, it's all about delivery. Your work speaks for itself. You can have all different types of personalities, but if you consistently deliver awesome results on time, you can solve hard problems and do it without sort of taxing everybody around you. I like getting really big hairy problems and being told like go take care of this. Just make this better, please. I always just focused on that. Like I have to deliver even if I'm on the way out. Like the year I spent at Grafana, when I went in, I told my buddy, I was like, I'm going to be here like a year because I kind of know I want to go do this other thing, but I know you need this. What is it that what is important enough for me to deliver for you in a year that you would be happy with me being here for a year? And we were very crisp on what that meant. And I made sure I delivered that before I left.
Yeah. Plus, okay. So that's brilliant, right? Like but I imagine these companies get really sad when you're like, I'm leaving, and they try everything they can to save you. Like, I
Not
don't do that.
always. No,
No. Oh
yeah.
no. Okay. I don't know. I imagine like two, so with your hydraulic, right? Like you came, you delivered, you left. They were like, oh my God, she's leaving this sad. Hey, I'm going to come back. It's really fascinating. Like your ability to sort of do that. But I love that you keep pursuing sort of the challenges that you want to work on at that time. And you
Yeah. If
have
I
that.
don't find it interesting, I can't do it. If I'm
Yeah.
bored, I do not do good work.
All right. So now you're an executive level leadership now at this company. So here's the question I love to ask all high level executives. Okay. As it relates to hydraulics. Okay. What keeps you up at night? It's my favorite question.
I'm going to say, how do we keep innovating? We've come up with some really cool technology that is very different than what other folks are doing in the market. And my team is really out there to help drive sales and like get customers using the software. So how do we continue innovating and staying ahead of what other folks are doing in this space? Because there's always somebody doing something better, right? Like whatever you're doing, if you're saying like I'm better at cost or I'm better at performance or I'm easier to use or whatever that is, in a couple of years there's always going to be somebody else that can be like, but I'm even easier than that or I'm even cheaper than that. So what are, how do we get into a super defensible position that we can stay ahead? That's really it. How do we continue to stay differentiated?
Since you started engineering around the same time I did, are you using any of these AI agents to sort of help you when you're doing the technical stuff? And what are your thoughts and opinions on that?
Sometimes I think of them as mediocre interns is probably the best way to put it. I can ask them to do something and I will get something back and it may or may not work. And even if it works, it may or may not be good. So somebody had sent me a query the other day. They're like, this isn't working. Full disclaimer, I had GPT write it. And it had done like all of this calculation on this one field just to get the field back. Like the calculation was effectively nothing. Like it was the same value after this thing as it was just like if you looked up the value. So, yes, but the thing I find is like if it's rote, if it's something straightforward, they're great. If it's anything where you start getting into complexity, like for us, like data can get really complex for some customers, they're not great at that because those are things where even humans trying to solve that problem have to sit down and discuss. We're like, okay, let's think about this. How are we using it? How we want to do this? So it's not a straightforward problem. If we're talking about something that's very pattern based, they're great.
And the platforms that you're building out hydraulics, is there a DSL if I wanted to do my own sort of search, or is it's all API
So
driven?
on Hydrolix, we support several different types of query languages. So natively, we support ClickHouse SQL, but we also support Elasticsearch, DSL, Spark, Splunk Search, a variety of things. So it's just really about what is the thing, what are you used to working with, and that's where we like to plug into your workflow.
Nice. All right. We are totally out of time. And as with a lot of my guests, I could talk to you for another hour because this stuff is really cool. And your background's amazing. I really appreciate you sharing all that.
Thanks.
We'll put everything in the show notes, but if somebody had a question after hearing the show, like what's the best way to get in touch with you?
Probably on LinkedIn. My name is pretty common. So if you look up Hydrolix on LinkedIn, you'll find me there.
All right, sweet. And we'll get that in the show notes. All right, this is William Kennedy and Catherine Johnson signing off from the Ardan Labs podcast. We hope to hear from everybody again real soon.